A nation's currency rarely collapses overnight, but America's dollar has dropped over 10% in 6 months as debt races past $38 trillion, and each household now backs $288,000 in IOUs. With interest costs surpassing defense and the world's faith quietly eroding, are we already entering the final stages of a crisis once thought impossible here? The warning signs are not coming, they are here. Germany, 1923. Prices doubled in hours, not years. A loaf of bread cost trillions of marks. The country's middle class, once secure, watched savings dissolve into worthless paper. The cause traced back to 1914, when Germany left the gold standard to pay for war, fueling debt until it reached 156 billion marks. The printing presses ran non-stop. By November 1923, monthly inflation hit 79.6 billion%. The mark collapsed. It had been 4.2 marks to the dollar before the war. By the end, it was 4.2 trillion marks to the dollar. People hauled cash in wheelbarrows but still could not afford bread. Social order broke down, and the aftermath shaped history far beyond economics. Fast forward to Zimbabwe, 2008. The Reserve Bank printed 21 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. In a single year, inflation soared to 89.7 sextillion%. Redenomination after redenomination failed. The currency was finally abandoned in February 2009. Only the adoption of the US dollar brought stability. In 1971, the United States made its own break from gold. President Nixon's executive order ended the dollar's convertibility, launching the world into a new era of pure fiat money. Each of these moments began with policy decisions that seemed manageable until confidence cracked. The lessons are not distant warnings. They are reminders that currency value depends on trust, and trust can vanish faster than anyone expects. The United States Treasury's obligations have reached a scale without precedent in peacetime. As of November 2025, the national debt stands at $38 trillion, an increase of $4 trillion in just 10 months. The pace is relentless. $1 trillion is added every 100 days. For the average American household, the effective share of this debt is $288,101. The cost of servicing these obligations is no longer a distant concern. In 2024, interest payments alone hit $1.13 trillion, now surpassing what the government spends on Medicare and national defense. These payments have grown 83% in only 2 years. The Congressional Budget Office projects the debt to gross domestic product ratio will continue to climb, already sitting at 123% with no sign of reversal. The Treasury acts as the borrower, but the burden ultimately falls on taxpayers, and each new dollar borrowed today creates a larger bill for the future. The scale and speed of this debt avalanche are shaping the choices that will define the dollar's fate. The Federal Reserve stands at the center of America's response to runaway fiscal commitments. Since 2008, its balance sheet has ballooned from $900 billion to $6.85 trillion. Extraordinary measures like quantitative easing, first deployed during the financial crisis and then expanded during the pandemic, pumped trillions of dollars into the financial system. These interventions were designed to stabilize markets, but they also channeled government borrowing directly into the economy. The result is visible at the checkout counter. From January 2020 to January 2024, cumulative consumer price inflation reached 19.55%. In June 2022 alone, the inflation rate peaked at 9.1%, the highest in over 40 years. The effect is simple and personal. $100 in 2020 now has the buying power of just $80.45. For every $100 spent, Americans need nearly $24 more to purchase the same goods and services as 4 years ago. These numbers reveal how monetary policy decisions translate into everyday hardship. Expert opinion on the dollar's future splits along sharp lines. Federal Reserve officials point to the world's continued reliance on the dollar. 57.4% of global reserves are still held in dollars, the largest share by far. They argue there is no true alternative, and they cite the size of U.S. capital markets and the legal protections that support international investors. The Fed's defenders also call the $114.3 billion operating loss in 2023 a technical result of crisis-era policies, not a sign of deeper trouble. They highlight that foreign central bank holdings of U.S. assets reached a record $8.67 trillion in 2024. Across the table, monetary historians and Austrian economists see a system running out of time. They note that the average fiat currency has lasted just 27 to 40 years. The dollar's current incarnation is now 54 years old. To them, the Federal Reserve's first ever annual loss is not a blip, but a warning. They argue that the steady slide in the dollar's reserve share and the use of sanctions, including the freezing of Russian reserves in 2022, are eroding trust faster than official statements admit. International analysts add that the IMF finds no sudden rush out of dollars, yet the long-term trend is unmistakable. Each side weighs the same data and draws very different conclusions about what comes next. Three paths now stand before the dollar, and for American households, each carries a different burden. In the first path, an orderly decline unfolds. Policymakers rein in deficits, and the dollar's global role shrinks over 2 or 3 decades. Inflation grinds higher but remains manageable. Retirement savings lose value slowly, eroded year after year, but families can plan and adapt. In the second path, the dollar becomes a so-called zombie currency. Debt balloons past 250% of GDP, interest costs swallow a quarter of federal spending, and the Fed holds rates low to avoid disaster. The result is decades of financial repression, as savings lose half their real value by the time today's workers retire, and Social Security cannot keep up. In the third path, a triggering event, whether geopolitical or fiscal, sparks a rapid devaluation. The dollar could lose up to half its value within 2 years. Retirement accounts shrink overnight, prices surge, and social stability wavers. In all scenarios, central banks are shifting reserves into gold, now classified as a Tier 1 asset, while private investors debate whether Bitcoin is a safe haven or a gamble. The inflection point may come when interest payments pass 20% of federal spending. For now, every American must weigh these risks and decide how to hedge against a future that grows less certain by the year. Confidence, not gold or laws, anchors every dollar in your pocket. As debt climbs and trust erodes, the true collapse begins long before the numbers say so. What would shake your faith?